Hey guys, and welcome to another Mammoth Interactive tutorial on UI elements in Xcode using Swift 3. The focus of this tutorial will be on introducing the new UI element, which is going to be a text field. Okay, so this is what a text field looks like. Well, this is one of the variations of a text field, and basically it's going to be another interactive element where the user can enter in some kind of a text, and we can handle it in some way. So I just have this basic setup here where we have a button that's going to take in the text and change our label text. So if we were to just to enter some text in here, let's just enter in hello and press the button. We see our label text changes there, and if we were to enter anything else such as, let some other text entry and press button, then it takes in that text and changes it there. Okay, so basically this is just going to take in whatever text we put here. Once the button's pressed, it will output it there. Okay, so this is going to be a little different from what our final product will look like, but I just wanted to give you an example of exactly what you're dealing with. So again, text fields, interactive UI element that allows a user to enter some text. Okay, so basically it's really just a way to input text, and we see these all the time. I mean, even think about when you go to log into, say, Facebook or an email account or something. Anytime you have to enter any credentials, it's likely going to be a text field that we're going to use to do that. Okay, so let's just minimize this and let's get started. So I just created a new project, or started a new project in Xcode here. This is just going to be a single view application, so you guys should be pretty familiar with this process by now. Product name, let's just call this text field tutorial. And again, same fields filled out. We're going to click next. Let's just save this to the desktop or wherever you feel is appropriate. Let's minimize that, and we'll load up our main.storyboard file. So as per usual, we're going to start by just adding some elements to our layout here in the main.storyboard file. Then we'll work towards adding the elements into the code, into the view controller.swift file, and then we'll add some kind of functionality, and this functionality will include stuff like handling the input text, displaying the input text, and modifying the text field properties. Okay, so there's going to be lots of cool things that we can do with text fields. They'll appear in a lot, not necessarily all of our apps, but they will appear in a lot. It's really just a great way to take in text in any kind of application that requires a user input in the form of text. Okay, so most of the time we'll be using text fields to do this, and there's a lot of different properties that we can access and modify about text fields. So really quite a great element. Now, we saw in that example there, so if I just pull up the simulator again, it might not be running. Oh, okay, it is still running. We saw that we had to press the button to change the text. Well, I'm going to show you two ways to do this. We can change the text by pressing a button, or we can change the text by using the on-app keyboard. Okay, so I'm going to show you both variations, and then we'll be able to know how to do it both ways. Okay, so text fields, really great UI elements. I hope you enjoy this tutorial, and hopefully by the end you'll feel comfortable with handling user input text. So now we have our project all set up and have had a brief introduction as to what a text field is. We're going to add one to our layout, and that's going to be in the main.storyboard file. So we're going to go into this file, we're going to select a text field from our list of views, and we're just going to drag and drop it in and add it to the layout the same way we did with labels and buttons in the previous tutorials. So we'll also add a label as well as our text field, and the label's just going to contain our text from the text field. We're also going to add in a button, and this is going to trigger the text display because we need some kind of event to take in the user input from the text field and display it in our label. Okay, so now we're all set up to actually add our text field to our layout, and we've talked briefly about exactly what a text field is. Before we add it, I'm going to go more into depth though. So we talked previously about labels, and we did a whole hour-long tutorial on those, and labels are just basically there to display some kind of a text. However, once the app runs, unless there's code to modify the label's contents, the actual text within the label cannot change. So being a user and using the app, you cannot change the value of a label. However, with text fields, that allows you as a user to input some kind of a text so that we can then do something with it. So if you think of maybe a username password situation, where you have an account where you have to enter in a username and password to log in, that's a great example of where we'd see a text field. So as a user, you would have these two text fields, one for username and one for password, and we'd basically just enter in some kind of text there. So we'd enter in a username and then a password, and then we'd press a button that would log in, and those would be two text fields. So basically they just take in text input from a user, and then typically on like a button press or some other handler, there'll be something that happens from there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to add a text field to our layout, and we're going to add a label and a button, and you'll see why we'll do that in just a second. So right now I'm just going to switch over to main.storyboard in my file explorer, and it opens up the layout part of our apps. This is going to be called main.storyboard, and this is where we basically design our layout. So right now it just contains a blank canvas, and I can't really see very much of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and close this. So if we look up here, by clicking on any one of these, it closes the toolbar that's at that specific location. So if I click it again, it opens it back up, but I want it closed for now. I'm fine to have these two here, so I'm just going to leave them up. I'm going to view my emulator as an iPhone SE rather than the iPhone 6, just so it's a little more manageable in size, and you can kind of move this about wherever you want. And for the zoom, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, so we have a 75% zoom, and this allows me to see the entire emulator screen. So again, this is just a blank canvas we're going to put our views on. So the first thing we'll add is going to be a text view, and if we go look down here under views, we can either search for it under the filter, so text view, or rather this is a text field. We'll get into text views later. So let's just select a text field, and we'll just click that and we'll drag it over, and right now it's not going to add, but there we go. So once we see this kind of like pale blue screen and the green plus or rather the plus in the green circle, that means we can add it to our layout. So I'm just going to drag it and drop it. And I'm just going to select this square and increase the size a little bit. So now we've added a text field to our layout. It's very similar to adding any kind of UI element, such as we've already seen labels and buttons. So same process, just dragging and dropping. Okay, so notice how this is only one line long. We can't adjust the height, and that's because of the border style that we have selected. We'll get into more detail, but generally I like to use the no border style because that allows me to adjust the height and the width rather than just the width. Okay, so this is just going to basically take in a single line of text, and once we press our button, which we'll add in just a second, it will do something with it. And what we're going to do with it is we're going to display the text on a label. So let's just go ahead and add that in now. Just going to add it there and increase the size a little bit. And the last element we'll add will be this button. I'm just going to add this here. And again, just, interesting. Again, just increase the size of it just a tiny bit. Okay, so now we have our text field added. We have our label and our button. Basically, what's going to happen in this app is we're going to enter in some kind of text into the text field, or into the text field as a user. Then we're going to press the button and have it display on our label. And in fact, I'm actually going to switch the label and button places. Okay, there we go. It's being a little uncooperative there. So I'm just going to have the button below and the label just below the button. So again, user input here in the form of text. The button press here will display whatever the text is on our label here. And just something to note, the input is always taken in as a string, and it's always passed to our label as a string as well, okay? So just keep that in mind, that we'll need to modify any kind of input if we need, for example, if we need our input in the form of an integer, then we'll have to convert our string to an integer as we pass it in. Okay, So now we have the fields added to our layout. Let's go ahead and just modify a couple of the properties in the attributes inspector. So I'm just going to select the text field first, and what we're going to do is we're going to look under this text section, and I'm not going to add a text to it, I'm just going to add a placeholder text. And the reason I choose a placeholder text instead of a text is that the placeholder text adds this kind of faint text that gives the user a prompt but disappears as soon as the user clicks on it. So I'm just going to say enter text here. Now I'm sure you, having used smartphones, I'm sure pretty much everyone has seen these, and not even on smartphones, on a lot of websites where there's kind of a prompt to enter text as a user, we'll have a placeholder text. So again, this just displays what we want the user to do here. In this case, it's going to be just entering some text, and it disappears as soon as the user clicks on it, so that we have just a blank text field to write on. If we had added text rather than placeholder, then that kind of forces the user to delete the text that's there before the user can add anything in this text field. So the second thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to align it, and that's because I like my text to be centered personally. But we can also modify the alignment from the code itself. The next thing is I'm just going to select our button, and I'm just going to change the text to say something like display text. Okay, and that's all good. And the next thing is going to be the label. I'm just going to center this, and this time there is no placeholder text, so I'm just going to change the text itself. And this is just going to be something like display text from text field. Okay, and with an enter, we get this text being displayed. Okay, so now our layout is all set up and ready for us to use. Just to recap what we've done, we've added this text field here, so this will take in the user input text. We have this button, this is called display text, and we have this label which just has the text right now, display text from text field. So once the user enters some kind of text, presses the button, the label will change from display text from text field to contain whatever text was entered in this text field here. Okay, so that's what we've done. We just modified some of the properties such as the placeholder text and the text itself. And yeah, so now we're going to take a look at actually implementing these in the code itself. So we're going to have to add these fields to the code, and then we'll be able to modify certain properties within them and handle the user input text. Okay, so in this part of our tutorial, we just added a text field to our layout in the main.storyboard file. We also added a button and a label, and the button will basically cause text from our text input to be displayed on the label when the button is pressed. So it's just going to take our input as a user and display it on the label. And this is an important skill to have to be able to do this, so this combination is pretty common, this combination of the text field, label and button, and we're going to be using this in many applications to come, because most applications will need to take in some kind of user input in the form of text, and it will be we'll take in that text, and often there'll be some kind of a button press or some event that will trigger that text to be handled or displayed.